Hello and welcome again to the last episode of the year for Fully Alive TV. I'm your host, Aaron Zauber, and I'm so grateful and happy to be with you this morning. Thank you for tuning in. We're going to talk today about the guiding principles of human connection. I'm going to be speaking from my own experience and my own perception, as of course I can only do. And I'm really excited to share this with you today. This is something that I have invested around a decade of not just theoretical research, thousands of podcasts, hundreds of books, but also actual experience in terms of cold approach pickup, which I've talked about before, going out to bars and clubs over 1,000 nights in my early 20s, lots of sales experience, um, authentic relating experience, one taste life coach training program. So many different forms and modalities and actual experience beyond just the theoretical. So I'm really excited to talk to you about some of that this morning. And hopefully what you'll get by listening in today is some rules of thumb or some guiding principles that will allow you to create connection more easily so that connection in your life flows more easily in the connections you already have, the relationships you already have, and in new relationships. So being able to start new connections as well. Also, as always, I want to invite you to participate. I, I can come up here and share some things that I know, and where my gifts really lie is in connecting with another person, listening, helping to guide someone into themselves, and maybe just answer their questions. That's what where probably my gifts are better. So you can do that in a couple ways. One is you can call in. You can literally just pick up your phone and dial this number that is on the banner on the screen that'll flash every once in a while. It's 919-518-9773. You can also log in to the chat if you're on nisancommunications.com/live. You can just log into the chat, type your question there for a very low, a lower intensity way of participating, and we may answer your question here as well. So, we'll also at some point I'll lead you in a short embodiment meditation so that again we can practice. There's always, I talk a lot about on this show, the paradox of being human and the dualities that are present in this reality. And one of them is what I mentioned just a minute ago, this idea about there's the theoretical, there's our conceptual understanding of things, and then there is our practice where we get to experience what we think about. And in my experience, the actual practice, so an actual embodiment meditation is at least as important as the framework, the intellectual framework. I think both of them are necessary, just like we need masculine and feminine, we need the thoughts plus the practice. So we'll do a little embodiment meditation as well. And by the end of the show, you should be able to you should have some principles, some definitely some food for thought, some a unique perspective on things in terms of human connection. So my story and the reason why I'm so interested in this and I love sharing about it is because I started out really nervous, really fearful of myself and of other people in life and not really knowing how to create connection. I remember very in one sense, what may seem like a very basic concept, like open your heart, was very foreign to me. And I had no idea what was even meant by that when people would say that. I heard it in all sorts of circles, growing up Christian and or growing up Jewish Christian, and then sort of, going from there, this idea about open your heart. Like what does that actually mean? All the way through, well, and just to touch on that, what I found that means is we have the ability to open our heart by putting our awareness in the area of our actual physical heart. And if you do that, and you can do it right now with me, just kind of become aware of the sensations in and around your heart, just sensing what's there. For a lot of us, there's considerable tightness there. There's sometimes, there's often some pain there or some sadness. Sometimes there's joy. Sometimes there's an outflowing, or sometimes there's both. And both can definitely coexist there. But when we simply put our awareness there and let it rest gently and allowing any judgments, we may have thoughts. We may think, oh, there's a lot of tightness there. Or we may judge it positively, right? Like, wow, there's a lot of joy there. And notice how those thoughts can almost get in the way of our actual presence with the experience. So just putting your awareness there. And then the other thing is neither forcing. So one thing is not forcing it to happen. I think that it's very common in our culture that we have this orientation of control is really what it is. And control is really the what I see as the fulcrum or the foundation of violence. It eventually leads to violence. Um, Control is based uh, on force, essentially, or or it's directly interrelated with force. So if we come to our heart, for example, we can apply this principle to everything, and I'll show you how it's tied to basic human connection. If we try to force our heart open before it's ready, we're doing ourselves and other people a disservice. But rather, and here's the next, or I guess the first principle of human connection that I'll offer you today is to approach connection, whether it's to yourself or to other people, which is really the same thing. I'll show you here in a minute. But to approach connection with gentleness and letting go of any attempt to force it to happen. Okay. We have a lot of talk these days around this idea of consent. Super important. I think consent is crucial to our capacity to actually be in flowing harmonic, harmonizing connection and balance among each other as humans, between and among each other. So it starts with ourselves. Our relationship to ourself, our connection with ourself is our connection with other people. So principle number one that I'll give you here, it's not really any particular order of importance, but rather just principles that I've learned along the way in the past 10 years of intensive theory plus practice. Principle number one is instead of trying to control the situation, instead of trying to control connection, simply offer connection. Do you see the difference there? Do you perceive the difference? It's so critical. When we approach, and again, let's just start with ourselves, right? Because if we can't connect with ourselves, we're not really going to be able to connect with other people. If we can't love ourselves, that is to be present with ourselves, we can't be present with other people. It's not there. The good news is we can cultivate deeper connection with ourselves. We can do it. It's just a practice like anything else. It's as sort of a skill, a habit. So when we begin to put our awareness more into our bodies, the idea, the principle here is to offer ourselves connection and to gently rest our awareness, again, for example, on our heart. And to judge something is really sort of, in a way, that's a neutral word. A lot of times when we hear the word judge in our culture, what people really mean is to condemn. They mean to judge negatively. But to judge is just really to have a mind. It's just part of having a mind is sort of, in a way, it's like discerning. So we get these thoughts about things, so here's the example. You have a thought about how your heart feels. And the idea is, instead of trying to stop that thought, again, notice how trying to stop something is a bit controlling, right? However, the less controlling method will be simply to shift your focus. Okay, so notice the judgment, whether it's positive or negative. And instead of trying to clear your mind or stop the thought, simply come right back to your heart. And you may notice how when you put gentle, compassionate awareness sort of in and around your heart area, you begin to be aware of all the sensation there. And when you keep bringing it back, again, here's sort of a simple meditation we're doing. The thought takes us away and then just come right back. All you got to do. Again, coming back to it, to the heart. And then as you do that, you may find yourself becoming curious about the sensation, about the direct experience happening in your body. Okay. So we're offering ourselves here awareness, presence, love, connection. And that's the beginning of our connection with other people. So there's kind of two principles in there. One is offer as opposed to force. You can feel that sort of aggression in there. So don't force, but offer and shift your awareness. Where our awareness goes, wherever we put our awareness, we begin to energize the object of our awareness. So again, when when you put your awareness on your heart, you're literally energizing your heart area. In fact, there's a lot of research, there's ancient wisdom around our simple placing of awareness on a certain organ of our body that actually begins to heal it. It sends it energy. And that's a big part of the embodiment meditation too, is just that when we're putting our awareness on our body, we're actually allowing it to heal. And again, notice the language here, allowing it to heal. We're we at some point in our culture, in our collective consciousness, we started to habituate ourselves to an aggressive stance toward ourselves and other people, toward reality. Notice the slightly aggressive energy around making something happen. What I noticed, so again, I went out for over 1,000 nights to bars and clubs, approaching women, and of course, approaching lots of people because I was in clubs and bars. I was a kid who essentially throughout my teenage years, I experienced a lot of rejection with trying to get a girlfriend. And by the time I was in my late teens and early 20s, I decided I was going to do something about it. So, as I've done with everything in my life, when I really care about something, I put all my focus into it and I do everything possible in order to understand it. And I started from, approaching. Of course, most of it was cold approach, which just means I didn't know these people. I just sort of approaching people. And the I can remember so many times being such a sort of terrified young man, seeing the fear on the woman's face that I was approaching. Because essentially, here's the next principle of human connection is that whatever you feel, they feel. Okay, that was one of the big milestones, the big understandings that changed everything for me around human connection. Whatever you feel, they are also going to feel. And for whatever reason, I had my awareness. When I say a lot of times I'm referring to my awareness. My awareness, I had sort of relegated it to all into my head, all into my thinking mind, because, of course, the experience of my body, the sensations here were so intense and so, again, terrified, so afraid of just reality that up here it felt safer. There was sort of a numbness over a lot of my body. And in order to escape the, again, that the intensity, my awareness was just really up here. I think that's part of why I didn't even understand when people would say things like open your heart. What is that? How do you open your heart? It makes no sense. So as I learned and experienced that whatever I felt, the other person felt, I started to realize that the more I could take care of my personal state, of my personal experience, my state of being, my emotional ecosystem, then the more that other people responded to me, if you want to call it well, the more other people responded to me essentially just how I was feeling. In other words, when I could take care of myself, when I could relax, when I could get a sense of security, when I sort of felt happy about my life, then other people would respond to me with more positivity. It's a very interesting thing, right? So I began to see in a sort of gentle, in a maybe rudimentary way, the interconnection of my humanity. And think about it this way: when you walk into a room, you're feeling whatever you're feeling, right? Maybe you're feeling up or down or whatever. You walk into that room, and there's other people in there. You connect with those people. You make eye contact. Maybe you start talking. You're all going to start calibrating to each other. There's an emotional resonance that happens. There's a great book called A General Theory of Love that I highly suggest, written by a few psychology doctors out of a university in San Francisco. Beautifully written book. And it talks about the limbic resonance between us. Um, the limbic system is sort of our autonomic or mammalian nervous system brain, if you want to call it that. There's this triune brain theory. There's of course, the reptilian, mammalian, and then the neocortex. And if you think about like a Labrador retriever or just a dog, um, they're going to be more in that mammalian brain. That part of us as humans, because of course we have this part that resonates. Okay, if you think about like two bells ringing together, there's a sort of vibration that happens where when people connect, there's a harmonizing or resonating. So, super important principle. Again, I realized over the years and with experience, what I would do is, I would go out, I would approach five groups of people a night at the very least. So I was just over and over and over again, just sort of practicing these experiences and noticing that there is an actual resonance. There's something deeper than the intellectual mind that's connecting. And you can do that with other people, whether it's, again, I'm using this pretty extreme example as far as human connection goes. Um, you know, cold approach pickup. I also knocked on doors for a sales job that I had for around 6 years, which is again another extreme in terms of human connection. A lot of times there's there's a lot of intensity there. So that intensity is a result of our nervous system producing sensation. And the theory that I'm proposing to you is that your capacity to be with your sensation and to be, in other words, to be present with it, just like we were doing a minute ago with our heart, that as you become more skillful at that, at not resisting it, at not denying it, not forcing it, but literally just being with it, your capacity to be with another human also improves. And a lot of the times, what gets in the way of our capacity to be present with ourselves and other people is our conditioning. There are places in all of us. I've never met anyone in this life so far that didn't have their own set of conditioning. They were raised by parents or guardians that were were amateurs essentially. They it was it was their first time raising children in this life, and those parents were raised by their grandparents. And think about where the culture of the world has come. Think about 100 years ago, 300 years ago, 500 years ago, when the world was actually overall a much more violent place. For as much sort of fear is generated through our mainstream media, or just most media in general, when you look at the overall trends, our world generally has actually become less violent. So if you think about all these generations past and the fact that they've been raising children, there's this conditioning that gets translated. Even when you look at epigenetic research, the research around how our environment plays a part in the expression of our genes, even before we're born. You know, when we're still, before we're, if you think about a mother, a mother carries the eggs for the baby, of course, but those eggs actually came from her grandmother, if you think about it, because when a female is born, she's already born with the eggs that are going to be her children. So, right. So basically, when a woman who has a child, that egg came from that woman's mother. Okay, so if you think about all this epigenetic influence and all the conditioning and all these programs, if you think about beliefs, and whether it's your own beliefs and the cultural matrices of beliefs, it's almost like they're entities in themselves, and they impact us. They have an influence on our genes because of this epigenetic research. We know this from a scientific perspective. Of course, there's a lot of ancient wisdom that already talks about this, but we're simply rediscovering it through a little bit more of a Western lens. Anyway, the point is that we all have conditioning. We all have places in ourselves that are tight, that are fixed. And those programs are those programs are not always about connection and about openness and about, a lot of those programs contain the seeds that are from those old violent paradigms around the control, around making people do something, around the initiation of force. So when we can notice those, again, just like the meditation, we notice the programs or notice the sensations, okay? So it's all related. And then simply be with them, be present. They begin to unwind. That's the beautiful thing, is that we can actually unwind them. One of the things that happens when we encounter people in the world is that there's an amplifying thing that happens. In other words, when you're alone in your room and no one's around, things are a little bit quieter. As soon as you connect with one other person or with more people, do you notice how the sensations in your body increase? Some people have this thing called agoraphobia where they get anxiety when they're around crowds. Part of that is because their experience is just simply being amplified. So these different practices, these embodiment practices, and this framework that I'm offering you today can help you become aware of it, can help you to have more compassion for it. I think this is a crucial ingredient. And not that we're going to force any of it to let go. This isn't to say that, oh, this is bad, the conditioning, we need to get rid of it. No, it's not. Again, that's going to be a little bit more of an aggressive stance, and that may actually stop us from letting it go sooner, right? Because of our sort of trying to make it happen. So so again, when we can simply offer our presence, that's that's that first guiding principle of human connection that I mentioned here. Okay, so if you have any questions so far, because I know I'm throwing out a lot of concepts here and they may not be super grounded in reality to you, you can call in with a number there. You can also log in to the chat if you're watching online. You can go to nissancommunications.com/live to log into the chat there, type a question, and I'm happy to answer it for you. Maybe, if you have a question, chances are you're not the only one with that question. So it would really be valuable, not just for you or me, but for everyone else watching, if you want to ask the question, have some vulnerability there. Oh, I wanted to mention that around offering. There's something about offering something that is actually really vulnerable. It takes courage. Because if I just offer something to someone without really being attached to the outcome of that, where I'm in a way risking rejection, right? If I'm really putting myself out there, putting some offer out there, then they could reject me. They could reject the offer. And that could hurt, right? Because maybe I'm a little bit attached to that. My identity has become attached to this thing I'm offering. I think about, a simple example like at a club when I would, like extend my, I'd approach a woman, talk to her for a little bit, maybe extend my hand as a true just simple offer to maybe we're going to go to another room or another area in the venue, and there's that moment where it's like that's actually leadership, right? There's an offer of courage. It's like, do you want to take my hand? And then note it, and this can be applied to, there's so many areas this can be applied to. This can be applied to sales. When we make an offer, we create an offer, right? We ask someone, would you like to buy this product, for example? And to the degree that it hurts when the person says no, in my experience, that reveals our attachment to the outcome. Does that make sense? So another guiding principle of human connection here is going to be clarity of intent. Okay. A clarity of like, here's my offer, plus unattachment to the outcome. Okay. There's a big concept in the cold approach pickup world where they talk about neediness, and they talk about how neediness is unattractive. And um, I can definitely agree with that to an extent. I think the neediness there. It's sort of like if there's this clinging on, this like, oh, I need you to say yes to my offer of taking my hand, or else I'm going to be sad, or else I'm going to be hurt. And in a way, that sort of puts pressure. There's going to it creates some pressure again. Think about pressure, tightness, clinging, attachment to a desired intent, like an agenda, right? How does it feel when someone approaches you and they've got an agenda they really want, it's kind of dehumanizing, right? I think this is touching on that idea about objectivity when, if when people talk about feeling objectified, it's like there's not true connection happening, or there's at least some degree of attachment to this agenda that is beyond the moment, right? Not that we don't have the capacity to create, that masculine energy of initiating, of offering, of leading is a beautiful, crucial part of the whole picture of what we're doing here. We must have the masculine and feminine together as much balance as we can, and they tend to fluctuate, right? Night and day, winter and summer, right? Cold and hot. They tend to sort of fluctuate. And, if they can be gentle and not too extreme, usually that's when we experience the most balance. However, the paradox to this is that what I discovered is that there's something even worse than neediness when it comes to human connection. And again, I want you to apply this because it's really a niche thing that I was doing. I mean, there's not a whole lot of people who there was definitely a little community of mostly guys who would just go out and try to pick up women, try to create connection, however you want to say it. I know some people will hear that and feel like it's a really crude way of doing things, but give me a little bit of a break here. I was in my early 20s and hurting, and I just wanted to see what would happen if I did that. And and I'm really grateful for all that time, by the way. I feel like doing all that allowed me to practice a lot, to have compassion for developing skills, to have compassion for myself when because a lot of it was tough, I mean, I definitely a lot of the interactions went really well and I had a lot of fun. And a lot of it was really hard, to consistently put myself out there over and over and over again with, and I had friends doing the same thing. So I think that sometimes when someone is doing something, whether again it's like door to door sales or any type of sales, which again, if you think about it, both, even though I can imagine people would have some resistance around the comparison here, but I think that there's a lot of good comparison between cold approach pickup or a sales call because essentially each of them deals with a very intense human connection. There's an intensity there. If you compare it to the chakra system in the body, there's the first and second chakras, first, second, third. The first one is dealing with security, our sense of stability, our rootedness. They call it the root chakra. And that red root chakra often has to deal with issues around money. Okay, because money, of course, is directly tied to most of our sense of security. It's directly tied to that. So, and those lower chakras tend to carry a lot of sensation. It's that lower level. We talk about high and low vibrations, which I'm not convinced that high and low vibrations are any better or worse than each other, by the way. I imagine that it's, again, just another type of duality and that we need both in order to function. Because if our root chakra is not secure, if it's having problems and really insecure, then chances are that foundation is going to a lack of a foundation destabilizes those top stories, right? The throat, third eye, crown chakra, the higher ones. And a lot of our problems result from this attempt to spiritually bypass our more intense sensations in the lower levels, right? If you think about it, money, which again has to do with that probably that first chakra in most of our cases, unless we're sort of living in a cave or in an ashram or somewhere where we just don't money doesn't really matter to us. Um, that's that's related there. And then the second chakra has to do with sexuality, right? Again, foundational, highly sensational, very charged topic. Think about even just talking about these topics: money, sexuality, power, right? That's the third chakra. how those are some of the most charged, again, if you think about electrical, sensational, intense energy, some of the most charged topics that we can talk about. They get a lot of attention. At the same time, we have a tendency to sort of avoid that charge, right? So this ties back into everything that I'm saying here, which is my encouragement for all of us to practice being with that. So what I've done is I've intentionally lived much of my life in these sort of thin lines on the edges of my comfort zone, just continually over and over again, putting myself into situations that challenge my sense of security, my sexuality, just really placing myself in these situations. So where I'm speaking to you from is considerable experience, around 10 years or so of experience in dealing with these challenges, these areas of competence. Okay, so where are we here? A big thing, and another guiding principle, if you will, of human connection is that when things get intense, my my invitation for you is to pause. If you're like me, then you may have a tendency to rush into making decisions or rushing into a situation. I used to think that that was a good quality, and I didn't realize that, yeah, sure, of course, that can be helpful, but everything is context dependent. Every situation is context dependent. The appropriate action for the appropriate situation. Super important. And what I've discovered is that when things get intense, whether that's in a partnership with our significant other, when things can get a little heated, whether that's in connection with a stranger, someone we haven't met before, wherever it is, in a group, public speaking scenario, um, there's intensity, right? We come across intense sensations, which again, sensation happening in our bodies. So what do we do when we encounter that? Here's what I suggest. Very simple, and that is to simply pause. Notice that things have gone up in intensity. Notice that there's more sensation available. Pause, take your awareness, and put it in your body. Okay? There's a lot of information coming through. If you think about sensation in our body, electrical charge, you and I, we are bioelectrical systems. We're bioelectrical beings. We know this because, for example, we can touch our cell phone and we can move things around, right? How's that happening? It's picking up on the electricity in our finger. If you're like me, you feel a lot of electricity in the palms of your hands. If we touch an electrical wire, it affects us. We have electromagnetic sensation going through us all the time. And electromagnetic current, as we know, holds information. That's how you can hear me right now. Because this information, my words, my voice, the vibrations that I'm sending out are going through wires or through thin air carried by electricity and by electromagnetic sensations. In other words, again, electromagnetism carries information. So when you have lots of electricity in your body, that's a lot of information. And maybe it's to your advantage if you read it, if you read that information, if you pick up on it, if you pay attention. What is this information trying to tell me? And I suggest that there is a wisdom in your body beyond the wisdom in your mind, that we can know things through not just intellectual understanding, but through direct experience. So that when I walk into a room, I connect with another human. and I feel something in my body, I can know a lot. There's a lot that I can just know by being in connection with them, right? So again, high intensity, high sensation. What do? We pause, take some breaths, put a little space around that information, give it a little time. It can take a little bit of time, a little bit of patience to allow that information to present itself to us. That's part of what of the nature of the feminine actually is to sort of be this information that reveals itself to us when we hold it, right? When we sort of gently allow it to, right? I'm thinking of this container metaphor where where the masculine energy has a container for the feminine. If you think about like water, water is gonna be in that container that is held. Okay, so a little digression there. Even the idea of vulnerability, which is such a hot topic today. I talk a lot about vulnerability on this show, really just revealing what's there. I want to caution everyone that the circumstances, the context, the the situation that you're in, allow that to determine your degree of vulnerability. It's not a mandate. There's a there's a verse in the Hebrew book called Proverbs that says, "Don't cast pearls before swine." If you think about actually doing that, say you're on a farm and you have a pearl necklace or some very nice pearls in your hand, you're not going to throw the pearls to the pigs, right? Why would you do that? And that metaphor is talking about um, not there's no obligation to give our sort of the vulnerable parts of ourselves to every person at every time. There's a lot of seeming paradoxes in in life and these frameworks that we have. So it's very important to remember that there's no obligation. There's no obligations at all, really. There's simply choices. There's what we can what we can do because those boundaries can be crucial. This idea of the inner child, the vulnerability, the innocence, the playfulness that you have in yourself, the childlike qualities that exist within each human. There are contexts where it's appropriate to let those come out and let those really be free. And there are other contexts where it's not so appropriate, right? So again, each each sort of, rule is more like a guiding principle that can apply in certain situations. So I wanted to say that as we go through these principles, not to not to try to make a one size fits all. That's important. And ultimately, you're the sovereignty. You're the your experience of reality is what matters. Be open, right? Because all of us have gone through times where we have a perception that's simply inaccurate. We have an idea about the way reality is and we encounter some information and realize, well, I guess that's not how it is. So we're open to feedback and to new experiences, to new perceptions, new ideas, but we're also, we also remember that we have experience, right? It's always both. Um, I think I'll go through one or two more guiding principles, and then I'll lead us in an embodiment meditation. And by the way, feel free at any time you can call in if you want, or log into the chat and ask a question, and that'll really be valuable for everyone here. A really beautiful connection tool or guiding principle in connection is that when things get heated or there's an argument or dispute, using this simple phrase, when you said X, I felt Y. Okay, so an example of this would be when you said that I, when you said, gosh, what's an example? When you said, I don't care about when you said, "I don't care about you," I felt hurt. That would be an example. And the reason why this is important is because a lot of times when we're talking to each other in a heated in an argument, or we're working something out with each other, we can get into this if we're presenting to each other debatable information, like when you said, or we can say, take the example that we say, something like, hmm, it's a good example for this. I think it comes down to, trying to paint the whole world with one perception instead of simply sharing our experience alone without the perception. So if I tell you I felt hurt, maybe in the back of my mind I'm still trying to blame you for that, but the more that I can simply be with that experience without blaming, without saying any more than that of something that's debatable, like if I say I felt I felt hurt and that's your fault, well, that's a debatable statement, right? If I say it's your fault the way that I feel, that may or may not be true, right? And it's probably not true. Essentially, ultimately, we are responsible for our own experience, right? And when we when we feel something inside of ourselves, of course, where is that experience happening? What's happening inside? And of course, we can feel hurt by certain words. Someone's trying to attack us or lash out or get aggressive. It can absolutely be hurtful, which is sort of the paradox here. But ultimately, that experience is happening inside of us, and and the more that we can take responsibility for our own experience, the more empowered we are, and the less that we blame other people for our own experience, the more empowered we are. Okay, that is to say the same thing. I'm not blaming anyone but myself. I'm taking responsibility. The paradox of that is that, of course, sometimes there's people around that it just consistently feels really painful to be around them. And in those examples, of course, it would be very generous for us to share with them our experience, to share with them the impact of our experience. And if we can do so with using only the raw data, when you said that thing, I felt hurt, then we're we're allowing that the raw experience to come out without anything extra, without any blaming, without any debatable facts. What that does is it allows for a connection, allows for a real connection to happen. And I wish I had a better example here, um, but maybe you get the point. Maybe just remembering that little formula. This formula has helped me out so much in my life. When you said X, I felt Y. Okay. And letting go of that blaming, letting go of that drama triangle of the of the victim. Of course, if I'm blaming someone for doing something, I'm putting myself in the victim seat, right? It's your fault that I feel this way. And so that person whose fault it is, who I'm thinking it's their fault, they're the persecutor, right? And the drama triangle, so in every victim persecutor situation, of course, in order for there to be either one, there has to be the other. There's no victim without a persecutor. There's always a third, which is the hero. That drama triangle, there's a great book by Lynn Forrest called, I think it's called Escaping Victim Consciousness, where it really goes in depth around this concept I'm talking about. Um, so so ultimately, the idea is that we are deeply empowered individuals. and we take full responsibility. Not staying in situations that are abusive, okay? Because we can always exit. Maybe being generous enough to share our feedback with that person. But again, noticing if it's intense, pausing, going slow, breathing, being with the information, and allowing the information to present itself. One of the things about anger, this fiery force that all of us all of us have inside of ourselves, whether we numb it or push it down or ignore it or try to escape. Um, what I would call a lower chakra energy. Often, people will call it a low vibration energy. Um, maybe it's just a more sort of fundamental or foundational energy. The beautiful thing about anger is that it's a force. It's a fiery force that can protect. It can help set boundaries. It can help us protect ourselves, our inner child, our bodies, our loved ones. Right. The problem with A lot of the problems occur with anger is when we allow it to turn into aggression and we attack with it and we use it for destruction as opposed to defense or protection, right? And that's why a lot of times people look at anger and they say anger is bad, or they're like, oh, that's a low vibration energy, with the implication being that that's bad, as if the foundation is worse than the roof of the house. Not necessarily. It's about what we do with it, right? A lot of times people's experience with anger, they've seen anger associated with a lot of destruction, like I've talked about before. Maybe they've seen, situations, very abusive situations. Maybe like fire, they've seen it burn down a forest. So they say, oh, fire's bad. But again, that's not necessarily the case. Fire can be good. It can be constructive and life-giving, right? Like if we put fire in a fire pit or in a stove, that can provide warmth and allow us to cook our food and all these different things and give us life. Or it can be very destructive. So it's just a force. It's a powerful energy. So it's all about how we work with it and how we use it. And when we encounter intensity, how do we what is our relationship to that? When we encounter an anger in other people, do we condemn that? You know, do we automatically say, "Oh, that's bad. That's an angry person." Or maybe maybe if that's an aggressive person, sort of someone who uses their anger to attack, uses their anger to try to control others, try to control situations and control things, maybe we call that out. Maybe we start a new cultural idea in the world that it's not anger that's bad, but it's aggression. It's the attacking, the lashing out. And again, because of the association, it's easy to get them confused. Um, but but to ignore our anger, to suppress it, this is very common in spiritual circles. Is that again, this sort of there's this thing in spirituality where people want to be in the high vibrations, right? The love and light thing, almost as if to say that anger is not part of love, almost to again condemn the foundation while celebrating the roof of the house. And imagine that if you have a dog, say you have this pit bull, take a little bit of a controversial animal, right? Of course, pit bulls can be the sweetest dogs in the world. Um, but imagine if you took that pit bull that could protect your family, say you have a sort of like a guard dog at your house, and then you take that, again, representing maybe that anger energy, that protective, fiery energy, and then you lock it in the basement in a cage and you don't feed it much. Well, when you take that pit bull out of the cage, there's a big chance that it's not going to behave very well, right? So that's another way that we get confused because we miss some of the nuance around it. If someone's been ignoring anger or they're trying to suppress anger, put it away, put it again in the dark corner of the basement, and then maybe it just explodes out like a volcano. And then we say, "Oh yeah, look, anger is bad. Obviously, oh, the pit bull is bad." But again, that's a very simplified way. It's an oversimplified way of looking at it. So, what I'm suggesting it to you is that every part of the human experience is is important. It all depends on the context, and it depends on our relationship to each part. I want you to begin thinking of every person around you in your community, every stranger, everyone as a part of you. Because, of course, the experience that you have in connection with every other person, whether it's some random stranger on Facebook or social media, or a random person in traffic or at the grocery store, someone in your community, or a very good, very close friend. Every single person, your experience of that person, where is that happening? It's happening inside of you. It's happening right here. So your relationship to your experience of reality is what truly matters. And when you can begin infusing all of it with compassion, not to blindly accept all of it as good or as constructive. Some elements, of course, are very destructive, but understanding that each element plays a part, a crucial part. And to begin unwinding some of this conditioning. So it starts with, again, the embodiment, the awareness, especially when we encounter the intense sensation, when we encounter maybe someone that we don't like, allowing ourselves to be with those edges of our comfort zone. Maybe finding a place that is not overwhelmingly sensational, overwhelmingly intense, but also a place that is not so devoid of sensation that we're not feeling much at all, that we're kind of dead. So finding that happy medium zone where we're just a little bit on the outside of our comfort zone. And I I suggest that that is the place in our lives that we can actually feel more fully alive. We have some life flowing through our veins. We have some flowing through our nervous system. We have some electricity, some power, some energy inside of us. So we've been through several guiding principles today. We're coming to wrapping up. I'll just briefly review what we learned about. We learned about the idea of offering something as opposed to trying to make someone do something. Feel the difference just even in those two energies. An offer where we're not attached to the outcome, but just a free offer, give, take it or leave it. We talked about pausing when things are intense, slowing down, being aware of the information that is revealing itself to us. We talked about vulnerability as a crucial part of human connection, but also being aware that it's context appropriate and context dependent. We talked about the simple formula to use when things are intense in human connection. When you said X, I felt Y, presenting the raw data of what happened so that we don't fall into blaming, we don't fall into lashing out, or we don't fall into victimization and, and maybe some type of heroics and that whole drama triangle that I mentioned. And we talked about the basic principle of being that our connection to ourselves is our connection to other people. That old that old idea from cold approach pickup that whatever you feel, they feel. Okay? And that connection always starts with ourselves. So, to wrap up today, I really want to thank you for tuning in here. I hope that you've gotten some food for thought at the very least. If you have questions, I would love to hear them. I'm out here sort of doing this experiment every Tuesday. I'm not going to be here next Tuesday, of course, because it's Christmas Day. So, early Merry Christmas to everybody if you celebrate that. And also, for the new year, I may not do an episode because that's a Tuesday as well on the first. Um, But I'll keep you posted on all that. You can write me at aaron@fullyalive.coach. That's my email. And I do a little bit of coaching here and there right now. So may have some slots where you could get an exploration session complimentary. Just write me an email first with sort of the situation. We'll see if it might be a good fit. And I can help you with human connection, with these relationships that we're all dealing with here on earth. So I hope you have an awesome week, awesome day. Remember to be compassionate with yourself, and I wish you all to be ever more fully alive each and every day. Thanks for tuning in. And Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.